The galaxy had been quiet for 300 years. Not the good kind of quiet that comes with peace, but the terrible silence that follows when every voice of resistance has been crushed. The Dominion ruled from the core worlds to the outer rim with a simple philosophy: terror keeps order. Their ships were black as space itself, designed to strike fear into anyone who saw them. When they arrived at a new world, they brought death and slavery in equal measure. Every alien species in the galaxy knew the stories. They had tried to resist when the first came to their green world. The Dominion had burned their forests and poisoned their rivers until the survivors begged for mercy. The proud warrior race called the had fought for 50 years before watching their crack apart under weapons. Now both species worked in the mines and factories, their spirits broken, their children raised to serve. Commander stood on the observation deck of his command center, looking down at the human work camp on 442C. The red dirt stretched for miles, broken by the dark mouths of mining shafts and the gray boxes that served as barracks for the workers. Dust clouds rose where humans dug deeper into the planet, searching for the rare minerals that powered technology. Scaled hide was a deep purple that marked him as nobility among his people. His 4 eyes could see heat patterns, which made it easy to spot humans trying to hide or escape. Not that many tried anymore. The first few years after humanity's defeat had been difficult, with constant attempts at rebellion. But time and hunger had a way of teaching lessons. "Status report," he commanded in the clicking language of his people. His aide, a younger with bright yellow stripes, consulted his data pad. "Production is at 92% of target, Commander. We lost 6 workers this week to mining accidents and exhaustion. The humans are requesting more medical supplies and food rations." His mouth parts clicked in what might have been laughter. Requesting, they seemed to forget their place. Reduce their food by 10%. That will remind them they are here to work, not to make demands. The aide made notes on his pad. This was how it always went. The humans would ask for something basic like food or medicine. They would refuse or reduce what little they already had. A few more humans would die. The rest would work harder out of fear. It was a system that had worked perfectly for 50 years. Below in the camp, the humans went about their daily routine. They woke before dawn, ate a thin gruel that barely counted as food, and marched to the mines under guard. They worked until sunset, their hands bleeding from the rough tools, their lungs filled with dust. Then they returned to the barracks to sleep on hard beds and dream of the worlds they would never see again. But noticed something strange about humans that he had never seen in other species. Even after 50 years of slavery, even with their families broken apart and their leaders dead, they still formed bonds with each other. They shared food with the sick. They told stories to keep hope alive. They protected their children with a fierce love that seemed almost insane. They had tried to understand this behavior. Their own young were raised in group nurseries until they were old enough to fight for rank and position. Family meant nothing to them beyond genetic necessity. But humans would risk punishment or death to help someone they called friend or family. It made no sense. Dr. Maria Santos finished her rounds in the camp's small medical facility. The building was really just a converted storage shed with a few beds and basic supplies. She had been a surgeon on Earth before the invasion, working in a modern hospital with clean rooms and advanced equipment. Now, she tried to keep people alive with bandages and expired medicine. They allowed her to work because they needed their slaves healthy enough to mine, but they gave her almost nothing to work with. No antibiotics for infections, no painkillers for broken bones, no equipment for surgery beyond a few rusty tools. Every day she watched people die from things that could be easily cured with proper medical care. In the corner bed, 8-year-old Sarah was playing with a small doll made from scraps of fabric. Her mother had made it for her birthday, using thread pulled from an old shirt and stuffing it with lint from the washing facility. Sarah's father had died in a mine collapse 2 years ago, but she still smiled and laughed like any child might. The other humans in the camp had adopted Sarah as their unofficial mascot. Workers would save small portions of their food to share with her. The older women told her stories of Earth and the cities that used to shine with lights. The men showed her simple games to play with stones and sticks. In a place designed to crush hope, Sarah's laughter was like a small flame that refused to go out. Dr. Santos checked Sarah's temperature and frowned. The girl had been running a fever for 2 days now. It was nothing serious, just a common infection that would normally clear up with basic antibiotics. But in the camp, even simple sickness could become deadly. "How are you feeling today, sweetie?" Dr. Santos asked, using the gentle voice she saved for children. Sarah looked up with bright eyes. "A little tired, but okay. Tommy said if I get better soon, he'll show me how to make a whistle from a piece of pipe." The doctor smiled, but worry gnawed at her stomach. Sarah's fever was getting worse, and there was nothing she could do about it with the supplies she had. She would have to ask them for antibiotics, knowing they would probably refuse just to prove their power. Above them all, Commander continued his watch over the camp. He had perfected the art of control through fear and deprivation. His sector had the lowest rebellion rates in the entire Dominion. His superiors praised his methods and used his camp as an example for other commanders. He did not know that he was about to make the greatest mistake in galactic history. He did not understand that some lines should never be crossed, some hearts should never be broken. He thought he knew everything about controlling humans through terror. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Sarah's fever burned hotter on the 3rd day. Dr. Santos pressed a damp cloth to the child's forehead and felt her heart sink. The infection was spreading fast, and Sarah's small body was losing the fight. Her breathing came in short, quick gasps, and her skin felt like fire under the doctor's hands. "Please don't go to work today, Mama," Sarah whispered to her mother, who knelt beside the bed. "I want you to stay with me." Her eyes filled with tears, but she forced a smile. "I have to work, baby, but Mrs. will sit with you, and Dr. Santos will take good care of you." The truth was that had no choice. Missing work meant reduced food rations for the entire barracks section. They had designed their system carefully. Every punishment hurt not just the person who broke the rules, but everyone around them. It kept the humans from protecting each other too much. After left for the mines, Dr. Santos sat beside Sarah's bed and made her decision. She would have to ask them for antibiotics. It went against everything she had learned in 50 years of captivity, but she could not watch this child die when medicine could save her. The walk to the administrative building felt like the longest journey of her life. The guards at the door looked at her with the same expression they might give to a talking animal, mild curiosity mixed with disgust. They made her wait outside in the hot sun for 2 hours before allowing her inside. Commander was reviewing production reports when Dr. Santos was finally brought before him. He did not look up from his data pad when she entered the room. "You may speak," he said in accented but fluent English. They made sure all their officers could communicate with their slaves. Dr. Santos kept her voice steady and respectful. "Commander, I am here to request medical supplies. We have a child with a serious infection that will become fatal without treatment. I need basic antibiotics, nothing expensive or complex." Now did look up, his 4 eyes focusing on her with interest. "A child, you say? The small female with the fabric toy?" "Yes, sir. Sarah, she's 8 years old. The infection can be easily treated with proper medicine." The commander leaned back in his chair, his scaled fingers drumming against the desk. Around the galaxy, they were known for their quick decisions and brutal efficiency, but was thinking about something more than just one sick child. "This child," he said slowly, "the other humans seem quite fond of her." Dr. Santos felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "She's just a little girl, Commander. The others care about her because she's innocent." "Innocent?" repeated the word as if testing how it tasted. "Tell me, Doctor, What would happen to the other humans' morale if this child were to die from a treatable illness? The question was asked in a casual tone, but Dr. Santos understood its meaning perfectly. Her hands began to shake. "Please, Commander, she's done nothing wrong. She doesn't even understand why we're here or what's happened to humanity. She just wants to get better and play with her friends." Stood and walked to the window that overlooked the mining operation. Hundreds of humans moved like ants across the red landscape, their backs bent under heavy loads, their bodies thin from years of poor food. They had learned obedience through pain and loss, but lately he had noticed small signs of resistance, workers talking in groups, meaningful looks exchanged between shifts, nothing obvious enough to punish, but troubling nonetheless. "The humans in this camp have become too comfortable," he said without turning around. "They have forgotten their place in the natural order. Perhaps they need a reminder of what happens when inferior species challenge their betters." "She's not challenging anyone." Dr. Santos's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. "She's a sick child who needs medicine, that's all." The commander turned back to face her, and his expression was the same one he might wear when deciding whether to step on an insect. "Request. The child will receive no medical treatment beyond what you already have available. Perhaps her suffering will teach the others a valuable lesson about the futility of hope." Dr. Santos felt something break inside her chest. "You monster, she's just a baby. How can you?" "Silence," his voice cracked like a whip. "You forget yourself, human. Guards, escort this creature back to her medical facility. If she speaks out of turn again, reduce her barracks food rations by 20%. The guards dragged Dr. Santos from the room, but she could not stop herself from crying out, "Please, I'm begging you, don't let her die." Her pleas echoed down the corridor until the heavy doors cut off her voice. That night, word spread through the camp like wildfire. Dr. Santos had asked for medicine and been refused. Sarah was dying, and they would not lift a finger to save her. The news passed from barracks to barracks in whispers and meaningful looks. In the children's section, the other young ones gathered around Sarah's bed. They brought her small gifts, a shiny pebble, a flower picked from the waste area, drawings made with charcoal on scraps of metal. Sarah tried to smile for them, but the fever made it hard to keep her eyes open. The adults watched from doorways and windows, their faces carved from stone. Some prayed to gods they were no longer sure were listening. Others simply stood guard, as if their presence could somehow protect the child from what was coming. On the second night after Dr. Santos's request, Sarah's condition grew critical. Her mother sat beside the bed, holding her daughter's burning hand and singing lullabies in a voice that cracked with grief. Other mothers joined her, their voices blending in songs that spoke of earth and home and children playing safely under open skies. Dr. Santos knew she was out of options, but she could not give up. Late that night, she made her way to the medical supply building where they kept the medicine locked away. She had treated enough guard injuries over the years to know the building's layout. If she could just get inside, find the right antibiotics. The lock was electronic and far beyond anything she could break, but desperation made her try anyway, using tools from her medical kit to scratch uselessly at the metal. She was still working when the searchlight found her. The trial was held the next morning in the camp's central square. All work stopped as the humans were forced to watch. Commander himself read the charges: theft, attempted sabotage, and threatening the security of the Dominion. "This human has forgotten the most basic law of our rule," he announced, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. "Humans exist to serve. They do not make demands, they do not steal, they do not act above their station. Let this be a lesson to all." Dr. Santos stood straight as they prepared the execution device. She looked out at the faces of people she had tried to help for so many years. Then her eyes found Sarah's mother in the crowd. "Take care of her," she whispered, and the words carried further than they should have in the desert air. The execution was quick and efficient, as justice always was. Sarah died 18 hours later, calling for her mother and asking why the nice aliens wouldn't help her feel better. Her last words were barely audible. "It hurts, Mama. Why won't they make it stop hurting?" When the child's heart finally stopped beating, something changed in the air around the camp. The usual sounds of quiet conversation and muffled crying simply stopped. A silence fell over the humans that was deeper than sleep, colder than the desert night. Commander stood at his window and watched the humans gather around the small grave they had dug for Sarah. He was pleased with how the lesson had gone. The humans now understood the cost of defying authority. He did not notice that none of them were crying anymore. He did not see the way they looked at the administrative building, or the careful way they spoke to each other in voices too low to carry. He had achieved perfect order and silence. He mistook it for surrender. It was actually something much more dangerous than rebellion. It was the moment when every human in the galaxy decided that the Dominion had to die. The news traveled faster than light itself. On the industrial world of B, a cargo hauler named Jake received a coded message hidden in a routine work schedule. The message contained only a few words. "Sarah, age 8, medicine, died yesterday." Jake read it 3 times before the data pad's screen went dark, then sat in the storage bay where he worked and wept for a child he had never met. Jake had been a Navy communications officer before the came. For 50 years, he had pretended to be just another broken slave, loading and unloading cargo ships while the alien overseers looked the other way. But the message about Sarah triggered something he had kept buried for decades. He remembered codes and frequencies, contact protocols and safe meeting places. That night, Jake activated an old transmitter hidden in the wall of his sleeping quarters. The signal was weak and disguised as industrial interference, but it reached others who had been waiting in the dark. On the mining world of Tau C, former Marine Sergeant felt her data pad vibrate with an incoming message. She was working the late shift in the ore processing plant, supervising a crew of humans who had learned to move efficiently without making noise. When she read about Sarah, her hands tightened around the data pad until the metal frame cracked. Had served 3 tours in the border wars before the invasion. She had watched her entire unit die fighting aliens who moved like shadows and struck like lightning. For 50 years, she had survived by making herself invisible, just another tired worker in an endless sea of human slaves. But now she remembered what she had sworn to protect. The network that awakened that night had been sleeping for half a century. It was made of old soldiers who had faked their deaths during the invasion, engineers who had hidden their knowledge while working in alien factories, scientists who had spent decades learning technology from the inside, teachers who had kept human history alive in whispered stories, doctors who had saved lives with nothing but determination and scraps. On Earth itself, now a prison world surrounded by orbital stations, sat in the ruins of what had once been New York City. The skyscrapers had been torn down years ago, their metal used to build alien structures. But in the tunnels beneath the city, humans had carved out a hidden world. Had been a Force Recon Marine, trained in deep space operations and alien combat. When Earth fell, he had led resistance groups for 15 years before going underground. The official records listed him as executed, but had been playing dead while building something the never suspected. The message about Sarah reached him through a chain of contacts that stretched across 3 continents. When he finished reading, stood up in his underground command center and looked at the maps and plans that covered every surface. For 35 years, he had been preparing for this moment. "Wake everyone up," he told his lieutenant, a former Navy pilot named. "It's time." The response began with small groups meeting in hidden places. On the farming world of 438B, workers gathered in abandoned grain silos to share technical knowledge. On the factory world of Wolf 359, humans met in the spaces between industrial machines, their conversations hidden by the noise of production. On the research station orbiting, Scientists exchanged information through modified laboratory equipment. Dr. Elizabeth had been one of Earth's leading weapons researchers before the invasion. For 50 years, she had worked in a technology lab, pretending to be a simple technician while learning everything she could about alien systems. Her official job was maintaining air filtration units, but in secret, she had been reverse engineering weapons technology. When the news about Sarah reached her lab, Elizabeth looked around at the equipment she had access to and began making calculations. They had given humans jobs maintaining their infrastructure because they thought human intelligence was too limited to understand advanced technology. They were about to learn how wrong they were. In a storage room deep in the facility, Elizabeth began assembling her first prototype. She used components from atmospheric processors, power cells from maintenance robots, and control circuits from communication arrays. They had forbidden humans from owning weapons, but they had never thought to restrict access to the tools that could become weapons in the right hands. Across the galaxy, similar work was beginning. Former military engineers were modifying mining equipment into artillery. Computer programmers were writing viruses that could spread through alien networks. Chemists were turning industrial supplies into explosives. Doctors were developing biological agents specifically designed to target physiology. But the most important work was happening in the minds of ordinary humans who had never been soldiers or scientists. Sarah's death had awakened something primal in the human spirit, the absolute refusal to let innocence suffer while evil went unpunished. On 442C, where Sarah had died, the change was most visible. The humans continued their daily work routines, but everything was different. They moved with purpose instead of resignation. They watched the guards with calculating eyes instead of fearful ones. They shared information instead of just food and comfort. Sarah's mother had become the unofficial leader of the camp. She still went to the mines every day, still performed her assigned work, still obeyed all the rules. But in the evenings, she sat with small groups of workers and spoke about her daughter in a voice like cold steel. "They killed her because they could," she said, "because they thought we would do nothing, because they believe we are too weak to fight back." She looked around at faces that had grown hard with purpose. They're going to learn different. The planning was careful and methodical. Every human in the camp had a role to play. The mechanics who maintained the mining equipment made small modifications that would be invisible until activated. The cooks who prepared meals for the guards began collecting specific ingredients. The cleaners who had access to the administrative building memorized layouts and security procedures. Commander noticed that the humans seemed more focused on their work than before. Production numbers were actually improving. He congratulated himself on the effectiveness of his lesson with the child. Fear, properly applied, could motivate better than any reward system. He did not notice that the humans had stopped looking at him with fear. When his 4 eyes met theirs now, he saw something else, a patient, calculating hatred that waited for the right moment to reveal itself. In hidden workshops across 17 worlds, humans were building an arsenal from salvaged parts and stolen materials. They created weapons they had never seen before, adapted specifically to exploit weaknesses in alien technology and biology. They wrote computer programs that could turn systems against their own operators. They developed tactics based on 50 years of studying their enemies' methods and weaknesses. Most importantly, they remembered what they were fighting for. Every weapon built carried Sarah's name etched into its metal. Every plan made began with a moment of silence for a little girl who had asked for medicine and been given death instead. The Dominion had ruled through terror for 3 centuries. They had crushed rebellions, broken spirits, and convinced the galaxy that resistance was futile. But they had never faced anything like what was building in the shadows of their own empire. Humanity was preparing to remind the galaxy what happened when predators made the mistake of hunting something more dangerous than themselves. The killing of Sarah had not broken human spirit, it had forged it into something unbreakable. The storm that was coming would sweep the Dominion away like dust in a hurricane, and every human in the galaxy would make sure they understood exactly why their empire was ending. The Age of Terror was about to meet something far more terrible than itself. The first sign of trouble came from the supply depot on 186F. The weekly transport ship arrived on schedule, carrying food and equipment for 3 different outposts. But when the crew tried to unload their cargo, every piece of automated handling equipment malfunctioned at once. Cargo containers fell from broken cranes, crushing the loading dock. Conveyor belts reversed direction, jamming the storage facility. The main computer system displayed error messages in a language nobody recognized. The depot commander, a mid-ranking official named, blamed human incompetence and ordered punishment details for the entire work crew. It never occurred to him that the humans had sabotaged their own equipment with surgical precision, or that the strange language on the computer screens was ancient English poetry. 3 days later, the transport ship exploded while leaving orbit. The blast was so massive it lit up half the planet's night sky. The official investigation found evidence of a reactor leak, but could not explain why the safety systems had been disabled or why the computer logs were full of references to a human child named Sarah. Across 17 worlds, similar accidents began happening with increasing frequency. On B, the great space elevator that carried cargo to and from orbit developed stress fractures in exactly the wrong places. The timing was perfect. The elevator collapsed during the morning rush hour when it was packed with officials heading to their offices. The falling wreckage crushed 6 city blocks and killed thousands of aliens. The investigation found evidence of structural sabotage, but the human workers who maintained the elevator had alibis for every crucial moment. The mining equipment on Tau C exploded in a chain reaction that made the ground shake for miles. The blast buried 2 command posts and collapsed the main administrative complex. Security recordings showed that the explosion started simultaneously at 17 different points, suggesting coordination that should have been impossible for the closely watched human workers. But it was the cyber attacks that truly terrified the leadership. Dr. Elizabeth had spent 2 years writing a computer virus designed specifically for systems. She called it Sarah's Revenge, and it was a masterpiece of malicious code. The virus lay dormant in communication networks for months before activating simultaneously across the entire Dominion. When Sarah's Revenge came to life, it turned every piece of technology into a weapon against its operators. Defense satellites began firing on their own space stations. Automated factories started producing toxic chemicals instead of useful products. Transportation systems rerouted ships into asteroid fields and planets' atmospheres. Worst of all, the virus learned and adapted, becoming more sophisticated each time they tried to stop it. The Dominion's military commanders found their own ships turning against them. When Admiral tried to order a bombardment of the rebel-held mining world, his weapons systems refused to respond. Instead, his ship's computers displayed a message. Sarah was 8 years old. She asked for medicine. You gave her death. Now we give you death in return. The message appeared on every screen throughout his ship, written in blood-red letters that pulsed like a heartbeat. When the Admiral tried to shut down the computers, his ship's life support systems began failing. Within hours, his entire fleet was drifting dead in space, their crews suffocated by their own technology. Commander watched his carefully ordered world fall apart with growing panic. The mining operation on 442C had stopped completely when every piece of equipment developed identical malfunctions. The guards who tried to force the humans back to work found their weapons would not fire. The communication system kept broadcasting human voices reading names, thousands and thousands of names of children who had died in camps. When tried to call for reinforcements, he discovered that his personal transport had been sabotaged. The engines would start, but the navigation system was locked onto a collision course with the planet's surface. The backup systems had been quietly replaced with components that looked identical but functioned as elaborate booby traps. It was then that realized the humans had been planning this for years. Every maintenance request they had made, every repair they had performed, every system they had been allowed to touch, all of it had been preparation for this moment. They had turned his own base into a weapon against him. The final blow came when the humans revealed capabilities they had never imagined. Emerged from the ruins of Earth aboard a ship that should not have existed. The vessel looked like it had been built from scrap metal and spare parts, but its weapons were more advanced than anything in the fleet. Ship tore through the orbital defense platforms around Earth like they were made of paper. Behind him came dozens of other ships, each one a unique creation built in hidden shipyards throughout the galaxy. Former vessels had been captured and modified with human technology. Cargo haulers had been converted into assault craft. Mining ships had become artillery platforms. The humans had built a fleet from nothing, using knowledge gained through 50 years of slavery. Doctor's laboratory on Wolf 359 revealed its true purpose when the walls slid away to expose massive manufacturing facilities. For decades, she had been using industrial equipment to secretly build weapons designed specifically to kill. Her research into alien biology had paid off. She had created projectiles that turned blood into acid, gases that specifically targeted their respiratory systems, and electromagnetic pulses that disrupted their nervous systems. The weapons were elegant in their lethality. A single shot from a rifle could kill in seconds, dissolving their internal organs while leaving other species unharmed. Her bombs created chemical reactions that were harmless to humans but fatal to alien physiology. She had turned the Dominion's own biological superiority into a weakness. But the most devastating human weapon was not technological at all. It was their complete unity of purpose. Every human in the galaxy participated in the resistance, from the youngest child to the oldest adult. They coordinated their actions through networks they had never detected, using codes hidden in work songs and messages embedded in maintenance reports. When the uprising began, 10 billion humans acted as one organism with a single goal: the complete destruction of the Dominion. Children served as messengers and saboteurs, their small size allowing them to access places adults could not reach. Elderly humans used their supposed frailty to carry explosives and weapons past guards who saw them as harmless. Workers in critical facilities destroyed infrastructure with precision timing that maximized damage while minimizing human casualties. They had never faced an enemy like this. Their previous conquests had been against species that fought with conventional armies and tactics, but humanity fought with the passionate fury of parents protecting their children. They accepted no terms, showed no mercy, and took no prisoners. The Emperor watched his empire crumble from his palace made of black crystal. Reports came in from every corner of the galaxy: fleets destroyed, colonies in rebellion, entire sectors lost to human forces. The mighty Dominion that had ruled for 3 centuries was dying in a matter of months. The Emperor tried to negotiate, offering to release all human slaves and grant them their own worlds. The response came from himself. Sarah was 8 years old. She died asking why you wouldn't help her. There can be no negotiation with child killers. There can only be justice. As worlds burned and their ships exploded in the cold of space, one message appeared on every communication system throughout the galaxy. It was written in the languages of every species the Dominion had enslaved, but its meaning was clear to all. This is for Sarah and every child who suffered under your rule. This is for Dr. Maria Santos and every person who died trying to do what was right. This is for humanity, and this is the price of making us your enemies. Remember our names as you die. The age of rule was ending in fire and vengeance. The species that had thought themselves the galaxy's ultimate predators were learning what it meant to face something far more dangerous than any military force: the combined wrath of every human parent who had ever lost a child to senseless cruelty. Hell had indeed been unleashed upon the galaxy, and its name was humanity. 2 years after Sarah died in her mother's arms, the last stronghold fell to human forces. The final battle took place in the skies above where Emperor had gathered the remnants of his once mighty fleet. 300 ships hung in formation around the Black Crystal Palace that had been the center of galactic terror for centuries. It was all that remained of an empire that had once commanded 50,000 worlds. Stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the enemy formation through His ship had been built in the hidden yards of Earth's moon, constructed from salvaged technology and human innovation. Its hull was painted with the names of every human child who had died in the camps, with Sarah's name written largest of all across the bow. Around him spread a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Cargo ships converted into carriers, mining vessels armed with weapons that could crack planets, research ships equipped with doctors' biological warfare systems. Every human world had contributed something to this final armada, and every ship carried a crew united by grief and purpose. "Admiral," came a voice from the communication station. "We're receiving a transmission from the Emperor." "Put him through," replied, his eyes never leaving the formation. Emperor appeared on the screen, his 4 eyes dim with defeat and exhaustion. Once, his voice had commanded the obedience of 1,000 species. Now he looked like what he truly was, a tired old tyrant whose time had run out. "I wish to discuss terms of surrender," the Emperor said in carefully pronounced English. His expression did not change. "There are no terms. I can offer you territory, technology, anything you want. My species does not have to be your enemy. We can coexist." "No," said simply. "You killed children. You medicined to a dying girl because you thought her suffering would teach us obedience. There can be no coexistence with child killers." The Emperor's secondary arms gestured frantically. "It was just one child, one life against billions. Surely your species understands the mathematics of survival." For the first time smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "That's where you made your mistake. You thought Sarah was just one child. But to us, every child is every child. When you killed her, you declared war on every parent in the galaxy who has ever loved their young." The connection ended, turned to his weapons officer. "All ships open fire, no survivors." What followed was less a battle than an execution. The human fleet surrounded the formation and systematically destroyed every ship. There was no escape, no mercy, no quarter given. When Emperor's flagship tried to ram's vessel in a final desperate attack, Doctor's biological weapons turned the alien crew into dust before they could complete their suicidal charge. The last transmission from the Emperor's ship was broadcast across the galaxy. "We ruled through fear for 300 years, but we never understood it. Fear is just a shadow of what humans call love, and we killed their child." Then the ship exploded, taking the last symbol of power with it. In the silence that followed, looked out at the debris field that had once been an empire. Around him, his bridge crew wept openly, not just for victory, but for all the children who would never again die simply because their parents asked for help. But the real work was just beginning. Within days of the Emperor's death, human ships appeared at worlds throughout the galaxy. But they came not as conquerors, but as liberators. The first act of every human commander was the same: destroy the prison camps and slave facilities, then provide medical aid to any survivors. On the factory world of Vega Prime, thousands of warriors emerged from labor camps where they had been worked nearly to death. They expected their new masters to simply replace the old ones. Instead, the humans gave them weapons and ships, then asked what they needed to rebuild their civilization. The refugees on the agricultural world of 452 waited fearfully as human soldiers approached their work camps. But the soldiers came bearing gifts, seeds from the carefully preserved in hidden gardens throughout human space. For 50 years, humans had been secretly keeping culture alive, waiting for the day they could return it to its people. Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated itself. Humans arrived with medical supplies, food, technology, and most importantly, with respect for the cultures that had been suppressed under rule. They imposed no human government, demanded no tribute, asked for nothing except the opportunity to help rebuild what the Dominion had destroyed. Dr. Elizabeth established the first of many medical research stations, working to cure diseases that had deliberately spread among slave populations. Her laboratories developed treatments specifically designed for different alien biologies, freely sharing their discoveries with anyone who needed them. Former human slaves became teachers and engineers, helping other species rebuild their educational systems and infrastructure. The knowledge that humans had preserved in secret languages, histories, art forms, scientific discoveries, was shared openly with its original creators. But perhaps the most important change was philosophical. Sarah's mother had survived the war to become the first speaker for the lost. It was her job to visit worlds where children had died due to preventable causes and ensure that monuments were built in their memory. Each monument bore the same inscription: "Here died innocents who asked for help and were refused. Remember them. Protect the helpless. Never again." The Galactic Council that replaced the Dominion was unlike any government in known history. It had no capital world, no supreme leader, no standing army. Instead, decisions were made by consensus among representatives from every species, with humans serving only as mediators and coordinators. The one absolute law that all species agreed upon was simple: no government or organization could deliberately harm children or deny aid to those in need. Violations of this law would result in immediate intervention by the combined forces of the galaxy. Now calling himself simply Speaker for Earth, gave the dedication speech at Sarah's memorial on 442C. The site where she had died was now a park filled with flowers from 100 worlds, and her grave marker had become a pilgrimage site for beings who wanted to understand human values. Sarah was 8 years old when she died, said to the gathered crowd of humans and aliens. She asked for medicine and was told no. She asked why the aliens wouldn't help her, and no one could give her an answer that made sense. She died wondering why beings with the power to save her chose to let her suffer instead. He paused, looking out at faces representing dozens of species. We cannot bring her back. We cannot undo the pain she felt or answer her last questions, but we can make sure that no child anywhere in the galaxy ever dies the way she did, asking for help and being refused. The memorial was attended by former slaves, human survivors, and even a few reformed aliens who had served the Dominion, but rejected its cruelties. Among them was a young child who placed a flower on Sarah's grave and whispered, "Thank you for saving us." In the years that followed, the galaxy slowly healed from 3 centuries of terror. Species that had been enemies learned to work together. Technologies developed for war were converted to peaceful uses. The vast network of prison camps and slave facilities was transformed into schools, hospitals, and research centers. Children from dozens of worlds played together in parks that had once been execution grounds. Scientists from different species collaborated on projects that would have been impossible under the isolating policies of the Dominion. Art, music, and literature flourished as cultures that had been suppressed for generations finally found their voice again. Humanity took no credit for these changes and claimed no special authority in the new order. When asked why they had fought so hard for the freedom of other species, human representatives always gave the same answer: because Sarah asked for help, and we should have been able to give it to her. The galaxy learned that the most dangerous species in known space was not the one with the strongest weapons or the most advanced technology. It was the one that would burn down empires rather than let children suffer. And in every human home, in every school, in every place where human children learned about their history, the story of Sarah was told and retold, not as a tale of human victory, but as a reminder of what happens when good people have the power to help and choose not to use it. The little girl who had died asking for medicine had become the conscience of the galaxy. Her name was spoken whenever decisions were made about the welfare of the innocent. Her memory guided the hands that now reached out to help instead of harm. The age of terror was over. The age of compassion had begun, and it all started with one small voice asking, "Why won't they help me?" The galaxy would never forget the answer humanity gave to that question.